On today's podcast, a belief of mine gets shattered. What's up, Active Lifers? Welcome back to the Active Life Podcast. I'm Dr. Sean Pastuch. Today's guest is Mike Millner. He's the host of the Mind Over Macros podcast. And today on the show, we talk about things like Optavia, why it's not the best thing in the world for you, challenges, why they can be ethical and valuable to the client. You're not going to want to miss this podcast. Mike drops some serious knowledge, a ton of empathy, and he speaks from a place of experience, having dealt with eating disorders himself and overcome them. Let's get to the show. Coach Mike Millner, welcome to the Active Life Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you making the drive out.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. It's nice and scenic once you get into Long Beach.
It's nice and scenic once you get to the last town you're going to be in.
Exactly.
Right. You drove out from Philadelphia, right, which is about a 2-hour drive this morning. And the scenic stuff, like if people have never been in or around New York City, there's plenty of skyline to see, cool bridges to go over, all that kind of stuff. But people who don't know, Mike drove about 2 hours and 15 minutes today. And I imagine, and we talked about it briefly, an hour and a half of that was spent dealing with traffic on the west side of Manhattan and then on the east side of Manhattan, getting in and getting out of the city to come here.
Yeah, correct. So you see like the miles are flying by in the early part of the drive, and then you're like, how is there still an hour and 45 minutes left? And then you recognize once you get into New York, it slows down quite a bit.
Do you ever, so you're talking about like on Waze or on Google Maps, right?
Exactly.
I love looking at Google Maps and being like, challenge accepted. I'll get there faster than that. And then you're almost there, like on the way home from DC. My wife's family lives in the DC area. So on the way home, I'm like, oh, we're going to beat this by like an hour and a half. And then it's like miles till home, 12, time, 46 minutes. What? Oh, yeah. So thanks for making the drive.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, Mike, how long have you been in the world of nutrition coaching?
So I would say in total it's been over a decade, probably about 12 years now.
How'd you find yourself into it?
Through my own struggle. It was definitely not the path that I ever imagined that I would be on, but I had a significant amount of weight to lose after I graduated from University of Maryland. And I grew up an athlete, so it was a very strange spot to find myself in because I was always lean. I was always playing sports. I did witness a lot of dieting in my family dynamic. I always remember my mom being on a diet. My oldest sister almost lost her life to anorexia, so there was definitely disordered eating tendencies in my family, and I thought I was the lucky one with the fast metabolism, playing sports all the time. I didn't have to worry about it. And then once I graduated, I was no longer active. I was no longer playing sports, but I was eating like we did at Maryland, where it was a lot of crap food and a lot of drinking. And
what are you trying to say about the cheesesteaks at the dining hall?
I know, right? And the late night waffles. And so it was a lot of that. And then I remember waking up in the morning and going into the bathroom and looking in the mirror. And for some reason, it was that moment that was like, who am I? I don't recognize this person anymore. And I probably was about 80 pounds overweight. And
this is right after college?
Yep. So I was probably 21, 22.
Okay.
And I stayed in Maryland an extra year. I met somebody who I eventually married. We were roommates our senior year, and she stayed for a 5-year program for accounting. So I stayed with her. And yeah, and then it was just that feeling of losing my identity because I'm pretty introverted, and I made all my friends and my social circle was all through sports. And so to me, it was like, if I can't step on a basketball court and feel confident, or get on a tennis court and feel confident, then who am I and what do I have? And so my solution was to try to lose weight as fast as possible. So I was like, if I can just get this weight off, then I'll be back to being me. And that led me down the path of chronic dieting and restricting calories, and I didn't know anything. So the very first thing that I did was I bought a piece of cardio equipment, put it in a little apartment that we moved into, and I would do 2 hours of this cardio machine every day. And on the last page of this manual was a meal plan to follow. And it was like, drink freezing cold water every day because it's going to speed up your metabolism. And it was like a 1,200 calorie meal plan. And I just followed it, and I lost a ton of weight, and then I gained it all back. And that was really the catalyst that, I have a pretty addictive personality. So I just kept feeling like I have to try harder, I have to do better. And it led me to a really dark place of just feeling like a failure. Every time I would fail and gain the weight back, I would blame myself and think that it was a discipline issue, it was a willpower issue, it was a personality flaw. Like, why is everybody else able to, my perception was everyone else can do this, why can't I? And I developed a horrible relationship with food, a horrible relationship with my body. Even when I would get really lean, like I went from 260 to like 165. And I remember being 165 and just picking myself apart in the mirror, calling myself fat, hating the way that I looked. And it impacted my relationship with my wife at the time. We ended up divorcing, and that wasn't the reason why we got divorced, but it definitely drove a wedge. Like, I was obsessed and crazy about food in my body. And it was hitting that rock bottom and then pouring into education that allowed me to crawl out of that hole and figure things out for myself. And I actually was at a local gym outside of Philly. We moved from Maryland back to the Philadelphia area. And I found this little gym, and the trainer there was like, have you ever thought about being a personal trainer? I was like, well, I haven't really, but like, it sounds like a cool thing to do. So that was like the first entry point, and he kind of took me under his wing and taught me some stuff. And I noticed the same thing with all the clients that I was training. They were showing up to the gym, they were consistent, and they just would have I would listen to these side conversations about how they couldn't figure out their nutrition. And they're like, I've been going to this gym for 3-4 years. I never miss a class, and I look exactly the same. And I was like, maybe there's something to this whole nutrition thing. So that's when I pivoted and went down the nutrition coaching path, and haven't looked back since.
What were you doing first of all, I appreciate you sharing that story. It puts you in a vulnerable place, and it's useful for people to hear where you came from, because it makes it easy to believe that you have empathy for it. What were you doing for a living when you were drinking ice cold water, eating 1,200 calories a day, and running on the treadmill until you got sick?
At that point, I was in HR for a random like security company. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I always say that I'm a late bloomer in life in general. Like, I always find myself figuring things out what I would consider a little bit later than I probably should have or would have liked to. So an example is, I had no idea what I wanted to do at college. I went to Maryland, didn't know what I wanted to major in. So I went to my academic advisor, and she was like, well, what do you like? I was like, I like sports. And I was like, is there like a sports marketing, sports management? She's like, well, we don't really have that, but you should just do communications. I'm like, all right, cool. That's what I'll major in. Zero relevance to anything that I wanted. I mean, I guess it helped me in some ways, but I didn't find my passion for learning and for education until well after college. I had no idea my career path until my 30s. Like, I just felt like there was always something. I was a little bit slower to the uptick than most. So I was just bouncing around to random jobs. I started bartending my senior year, and I bartended at the BWI Airport Marriott.
Okay, not what I was expecting at all.
It was a sports bar called Champions, and it was attached to the Marriott, which was cool because I got all the benefits. Like, typically the knock on bartenders is we don't get benefits, but being attached to a Marriott, I got all of the benefits as a normal Marriott employee, mm-hmm. which was nice. So I could go stay different places for really cheap and explore the world, and I enjoyed that. And then when I moved back, I transferred to a different Marriott, was bartending, and then I was just picking up like random jobs that were mindless, sales job here and an HR job there, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And then I actually started so I was working in HR, and that was when I started going to this gym. And then I actually decided to partner up with a guy that was a family friend who had a lot of experience in like marketing, and he was doing like direct mailers and things like that. And we decided to start this website that was kind of like Groupon, but local to our area. And it actually did pretty well. And
you weren't the founder and CEO of Living Social, were you?
I was not. It was much smaller. But we actually scaled it pretty quickly. And at the time, we were kind of butting heads. I had never had a business partner. I'd never had a business before. And he was a lot older than I was, just different philosophy. And we decided it was not going to work for both of us to own it. So he bought me out of my half of the business. And it was actually when I was sitting in that office that I got the call from the trainer at my gym. And it was just timing. I'm not happy with where I was at. And he was like, you know, have you ever thought about doing this? So I was like, actually, I think that would be great. And started training people. And I was also, I went back to bartending because as a personal trainer at a small privately owned gym, I was not making nearly enough money to support myself. So I went back to bartending, and there was a 2-year period of time where I would close the bar at like 2 a.m. and get home probably 2:30, 3 a.m. And then my first clients would show up at 5 a.m. So it was like a 90-minute sleep and then right to the gym. And there had been a few times where some clients would find me in the office taking a nap, and they're like, hey, are you teaching our class? I'm like, yeah, hang on, I'll be there in a second. So those were some memorable times.
Well, those are what I like to think of as the tuition years. You know, you mentioned earlier that you didn't have a clue what your career path was until you were in your 30s. And I think a lot of people rush to figure out what their career is because they're like, if I don't figure it out right now, I will be old and lonely and sad and broke 50 years from now. I know that was me. You know, I didn't start my career, if you will, the one I'm in now, until I was 34 years old. So I'm with you. I was a personal trainer. I owned a rehab clinic. I was a chiropractor in someone else's clinic first. I owned a CrossFit gym, 3 of them. And I thought an event company, like, this is where everything's going to go. Not at all. Not at all. So you got into nutrition coaching in your 30s. Yeah?
Yep.
Something transparent I want to share with you that I think is really actually a feather in your cap is I was first introduced to you as a brand by our mutual friend, Christy May Campbell. The first Christy May I met was Chrissy May Cagney, also a nutrition coach back in like the teens, the 20 teens. And now Christy May Campbell, very similar name, very similar profession, is our mutual friend. When she introduced me to your content, your account, your brand, the first thing I saw was that you were running challenges, right? The challenges you run for people. My first thought, my initial inclination was another person who runs challenges and tells people they're going to get the results that they're looking for in 6 weeks, but isn't actually going to give it to them. But Christy is such a high integrity person. There's no way that she'd be friends with somebody who's doing this. So I gave it a second look, and I'm impressed with the integrity with which you speak about what happens in those challenges. And I would love for you to share with people what makes the kind of challenge that you run, the kind of challenge that would have been valuable for you instead of the treadmill, the cold water, and the 1,200 calories, without that challenge being the complete solution to your life. Do you follow me?
I do. And I think it's important for me to provide a little context because I had a horrible relationship with challenges through my own personal journey. One of the most damaging programs that I did was a New Year, New You challenge. And it was a competition and it was a partner competition on who could collectively lose the most like body fat percentage, do the in-body scan to start the challenge. You and your partner, and it's like the best team transformation wins. It's a significant prize. I think it was $3,000 at the time. I was like, I'm all about it. We're going to win this. So I did it with I don't know if we were actually married at the time, but she was either my fiance or my wife at the time. And we're like, we're going to do this and we're going to win it. And I'm super competitive. She's competitive. So we're ready to go. And it's all these rules about what you can eat, what you can't eat, when you can eat, when you can't eat. And I was to the book. Like, I remember going to the grocery store and I'm looking at this list and I'm thinking, it's cool. I'll try some foods that I haven't tried and I'll eat some I'm thinking about quality foods. At that point, I didn't really have the education. So I'm like, I like apples, I like carrots, I like these other fruits and vegetables. I'm looking at the list and I can't find them. And then I look at the can't eat list, and sure enough, apples is on there, and then carrots are on there. And I'm like, I didn't think to question it. I was like, oh, all this time I thought that they were good foods, and apparently they're not. And
was it like a too much sugar nonsense?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Like the only fruits that were allowed were berries. It was like you can have raspberries, blackberries, but you can only eat berries if you work out that day. So like it was like couldn't eat until 2 p.m. 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. was my feeding window, and it was insanely low carb, low calorie, but I was religious with it because I thought this was the answer. I didn't even think to question where is this information coming from. I was just like, hey, this is going to get me the result that I want. And of course that led me down a path of obsessive tendencies and really orthorexia, which is just an over obsession with quote unquote clean eating, or whatever your perception of clean eating is. So then I became the person that even after the challenge, we didn't win, but after the challenge I stuck to all of those concepts of I can't eat earlier than 2 p.m. I can't eat apples. I can't have fruit unless I work out. I would go to family dinners or have lunch with my sister, and I'd be the person that's like, I'll have the salad, but put the dressing on the side, take off the croutons, take off the egg, take off the whatever else is just give me lettuce and chicken, and that's it. And my sister's actually an eating disorder specialist, and she was the one that sat me down. She's like, have you ever heard of orthorexia? And I was like, no. And I got all defensive once I figured out what it was. I was like, I'm just trying to be healthy. I don't know why you can't just let me live. And ultimately I recognized that it was a destructive pattern that I was in. So I always thought that like challenges were evil. And I swore when I got into coaching, I would look at anybody doing a challenge and I would immediately be like, I can't believe that they're doing this to people. How dare they? It's awful. And I just had this negative connotation immediately when I saw the word challenge. It would just make me cringe, and started trying to do some more work on myself, like internally. I was like, I wonder if this is something that's just it's triggering me for some reason, but I'd like to unpack it. And so ultimately I came to the conclusion of there's actually a lot of value in working with the way that our brains work. So I really dove into like the psychology of why challenges are so appealing and why people set New Year's resolutions and why most of the time they fail. And I was like, I can flip this on its head, and I can pull people in a way that aligns with what their brain is telling them that they want, and then I can give them what they need in the challenge. And most of the time people who are in the challenge are like, and I have one currently going right now, and there's this thread of all of the people saying how this challenge is like therapy. They're like, I didn't realize that I was getting a mindset makeover through this process. I thought I was getting a nutrition plan and a training plan, and here I am. Like, I feel more empowered. I feel like I have this new perspective on what this journey is actually going to be like. And I set that from the beginning of, I do a kickoff call with everybody who's in the challenge, and I say straight up, like, day one, if you believe that this is going to be a shortcut to body transformation and you just want to do this to lose 10 pounds, 20 pounds, whatever, just let me know. I'll refund you and we can part ways, because that's not what this is about. Like, we're actually going to learn how to fail. And my feeling is that it's the friction moments, it's the days of overeating, it's making poor decisions, it's skipping the gym. It's those moments, those friction moments where all the magic happens. And we've been so conditioned to treat those as, it's the all or nothing cycle. I slipped up one day, so screw it. I might as well just throw everything out the window. And the ability to like lean into those moments, it's never the moment itself. We always view it as like the binge is the issue or the overindulgence. It's never the moment itself. It's everything else that led up to that moment, and the stories that you're telling yourself and the narrative that you have about what that says about you as a person. So I was like, I'm going to do a challenge that really addresses these friction points and these failure points. And I tell people from the beginning, like, everybody in here is going to fail, and I want you to own it, like, right now. Just let's all get it out there. We're all going to fail. I'm going to do this with you, and I'm going to fail too. I'm going to do all the same workouts that you're doing, and I'm going to fail too. We're all going to fail together. And it's going to be how we handle that determines our overall success. And we have to project out beyond this 4-week or 6-week. And I've done different challenge lengths, but it doesn't matter how long the challenge is. What matters is that we carry that mindset forever. And if we're not in this, like if you're viewing this as a finish line, if you're thinking that there's an end game here, then you're in the wrong place. So that's how I kind of took the challenge concept and flipped it on its head as from something that was, a trigger for me to something that has been a huge asset in my business.
Can we stay here for a while?
Sure.
I'm fascinated by that. And I'm curious because you're piquing my curiosity. I held the same beliefs, right? The challenge is this toxic thing. It's like, oh, it's a challenge. It's 6 weeks and you're going to get these results. And then they're going to try to sell you something else. The challenge that you bought isn't even the thing that you need to buy to get your problem solved. And what you're describing in some ways is that in a way that I believe is being presented ethically, where what you're saying is, yeah, the promise I'm making on the front end is never that 4 weeks or 6 weeks is everything you're ever going to need. It's that, if I'm understanding you correctly, 4 weeks or 6 weeks is going to teach you how to fail because that's the most important skill for you to obtain for the long-term thing that we would do to be successful. And if in 4 to 6 weeks you identify that failing is not something that you're going to be able to do and handle, I would feel out of integrity to sell you anything else. Is that an accurate description of what you're describing?
100%. That's exactly how it is.
Okay.
And it's what I've found is it's a great stepping stone because our signature program is one-on-one coaching, high touch, highly personalized. We get to know the individual inside and out. It's, really what I think everybody needs, but it's a high barrier of entry.
Financially and emotionally. So it's not cheap. And it's not just I'll give this a shot. Like you're committing, you're putting up a lot of money. You are getting to know somebody intimately. It is a deep connection with a coach that is going to know you inside and out and hold your hand through this journey. Not everybody's ready for that level of commitment. And I like to have a stepping stone for people that are like, I think I need that, but I'm not sure if I'm ready. Mm-hmm. It's like, great. Well, let's see how you handle failure through this process to see if you are ready for the next step. So yeah, it is. You mentioned like the challenge being the hook. Then we're going to sell them the other thing that we really want them to buy. That is part of it. Mm-hmm. The thing that I want them to see is this is almost like the prerequisite when you were, taking a course in college. It was like you had to take the intro course first. It's kind of what we're doing. It's like, and what I also really like about the way that we operate is we'll tell people if it's not the right fit, if we're not the right program, if we can't help them and there's somebody else that might be a better fit. Like you talk about Christy, there's a lot of times where I'm like, you would actually be way better off in her community just because of what you're looking for. That she does an amazing job of taking people who are beginners or feeling out of place or uncomfortable and like, I don't think I fit into the fitness space and makes them feel at home and empowers them through that process. So there's plenty of times where I'll say, based off of everything that we've seen through this challenge, I think you'd be better off with this other program. Then there's times where I say, look, you've shown that you're in this mentally for the long haul. The logical next step is one-on-one coaching. And then they can make the decision if they feel like they agree with that. So you said a few things that I want to make sure I go back and touch on each of them. One of them is growing up, I played a lot of sports. The one that I was the best at was baseball. And I had a coach who I still remember the day and the lesson. It was, we're all going to make errors. What's important is that we only make one on the play. So you bobbled the ball. That guy's going to get to first base before you throw it there. Instead of rushing your throw and mailing it into the bleachers behind the first baseline, just put the ball back in your glove and hand it back to the pitcher. One error. And that's kind of what you're describing about you wake up in the morning, you're extra hungry for whatever reason. You didn't sleep extremely well the night before. And now you're like, I'm going to go grab that high sugar breakfast that I shouldn't even really have in the house, but I haven't gotten rid of it yet. And so I'm doing it or whatever. Oh, damn, my whole day is screwed now. And so, fuck it, I'm going to have the fried chicken sandwich for lunch. And then forget it, I'm not even going to go to the gym today. I feel like crap. And it becomes this, you bobble the ball, you threw it away. The first baseman chased it down the line, threw it into left field. Now, what would have been a single or an error is a triple, and the pitcher's got to change everything about the way the whole rest of the inning goes. That's what you're describing, if I'm hearing you properly.
Yeah.
The next thing that I'm hearing you say, and I want to touch on the words because I'm a student and an advocate's the wrong word, but I enjoy language. And you said, we're not cheap. And I forget the second thing about the coaching. We're not cheap and we're not like big group or something like that. It was to the idea that we're personal. I would love to hear you describe it in a way that describes what it is, so that people can hear without having to fill in their own gaps of, it's not cheap, okay? What is it? And you don't have to tell them the price if that's not what you want to do. I just mean, it's not cheap. Is it expensive? Is it valuable? Is it worthwhile? Is it a significant commitment? You follow me?
I do.
It is this, and then it's not big group. Well, what is it? I would love to hear you describe what it is that you do, and then explain to me why you think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, well, I would say it's transformative. Of course, I believe it's valuable. I think that, the irony is that there's a little bit of resistance anytime somebody is making an investment like that in themselves. And I think just by the nature of the industry, there's so many $100 a month programs, $75 a month programs, and we're not even near that price range. Like, we're 4X that price range. And so for somebody to look at that and be like, well, I've never made this type of investment before, there's a little bit of resistance. But most of the time, I would say within the first month, we'll get the feedback of, this is the best investment I've ever made, because it is transformative. It doesn't take long for somebody to see the difference between signing up for a program, getting a macro calculation thrown at you, getting a workout template thrown at you, and then having a weekly check-in that says, did you hit your macros? Did you do your workout? Great. Have a nice week. I'll talk to you next week. That I worked for a company that operated that way. The reason why I started my business the way that I did was because I morally and fundamentally disagreed with this cookie cutter algorithmic approach to nutrition, where if we had this perfect formula for giving everybody macros that was supposed to transform their body, then why was there a 99+% failure rate? And I would ask those questions because I was a new coach. I was trying to make a name for myself.
There was 99% failure rate at the company.
At the company with clients.
Wow.
And
I bet that's not the before and after pictures they were using.
So a funny story about that is I now work with a client who is a high-level CrossFit athlete, and she said that the company asked to buy her pictures. She never worked with them.
What do you mean to buy?
Like, the company was like, hey, we want to use your pictures to promote our company. We'll pay you to be able to basically sell your body as part of our program. She had no affiliation with them. She never did their program. She never worked with them before. But they were asking to buy her pictures to use as promotional material.
You're giving me right now, I'm re-experiencing micro trauma from my early career, because we would work with all these, and I want to get back to you really quickly. I have to share this with you now. All these elite athletes in the CrossFit space, and they would come to us all kinds of messed up. And they were already sponsored by these other, I won't name the other companies, who were talking about their recovery is with us, their movement, like their yada, yada, yada. And they would come to us like, hey, I can't touch my toes. I can't bring my arms up from my head. My doctor told me I can never do this again. And we're like, well, we'll help you compete at the games again next year. And when they did, because they were coming to us under the table, if you will, and these other companies were paying them for sponsorship, these other companies would be like, before working with us, this person had this problem. Now look at how well they move. And they would do fucking mini documentaries on how much better they perform than they did before they worked at this company. I'm like, I think you guys left out a big part of the documentary there. So I'm just,
yeah.
Oh, go on. I'm sorry. I felt I needed to share that with you.
No, it's way too common and it's unfortunate. So that was really the issue, was when I started talking to people who were coming into this program thinking they were getting this perfect macro calculation and were super consistent, and they were gaining weight instead of losing weight, and they're feeling frustrated. And the whole coaching process with this company was very automated and kind of copy and paste. When this happens, we send this message. And then I was like, let me just start asking the people themselves, the clients themselves. And a lot of times it was just, I feel like there's something wrong with me. I feel like I need to try harder. They would start focusing on things that were, well, I ate 80 grams of sugar to hit my carbs. Maybe if I had 50 grams of sugar, it would have been like they start obsessing over these little minor details. And I'm like, this is not how transformation happens. We're not helping anybody. We're not teaching them anything. We're not instilling any positive behavior changes. And so this is my convoluted way of getting back to when I started my business. We start every client with a personality assessment.
Which one do you use, or is it your own?
It's our own. It takes concepts of the Braverman model and the Cloninger model, and then it kind of makes it more relevant to nutrition and training. But we want to know like who you are, your strengths, your weaknesses, what motivates you, your tendencies, and get to know you. And then we do kind of a diet history and metabolic assessment to understand what they've been through in the past, how many years of chronic dieting. Most of our clients have been dieting since they were teenagers or younger.
This is after they enroll, yes?
After they enroll. So it's going through, well, anybody can do the personality assessment. That's free on my website. But then we do the diet history, the metabolic assessment. We understand their lifestyle, their preferences, their family dynamic, their values. So maybe you can help me with a more succinct way of saying this, but like the process is based off of what the individual needs. Somebody says, oh, is it a macro-based program? It can be. Maybe not. Many of our clients don't want to track, and that's okay. It's just one tool in the toolbox. It depends on how that works for you. Oh, do I have to train? Do I have to lift weights? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on what works for you. So we meet people where they're at, and we take them through the process of how behavior change actually happens, which is nonlinear. It's one step at a time. It's one thing at a time. But if we take inventory of where somebody's at, and let's say there's 9 things that we really need to change and that they're interested in changing, and I think that that's a really important caveat, is what do they want to change about themselves first and foremost, because we're not going to just impose a goal on somebody. We want to know, what does success actually mean to you? Who is that future version of yourself that you want to become? Once we have that clearly defined and we take inventory of where we're at and where we want to be, we can have 9 things that this person wants to change about themselves. Now, if let's just say we took those same 9 things and we asked 10 different people, hey, which one feels the most doable to you right now? We'll probably get 10 different answers. So the process is dependent on somebody saying, you know what, I think that this one right here is really doable right now for me. That's the highest level of confidence is changing this one thing first. Great, that's where we're starting. So there's no like easy templated way of saying that. Maybe you can help me with a more succinct explanation.
Maybe if you write it down, we can go through it later. I mean, it starts to me to sound like, we're a prescriptive solution to the problem that you struggle with the most. And that's not obviously the whole thing, but what you're describing is an adjacent version of a very similar, if not the same model of what we do at Active Life. When people come to us and say, they never say the words, I'm missing physical freedom, but they explain that they're missing physical freedom. And they're like, so what is it, like a program? Is it, one-on-one training sessions online? Is it, what is it? Like, yes. Right. And no. So we're going to meet you where you are. We're going to prescribe you with the solution that's going to match your interest, your ability, and your sustainability. Because we all know the results that we're looking to get are going to take significantly longer than 2 months. And what I like about the way that you're describing it, I've been recently thinking about this idea of how people expect results as compared to how results actually come. And if you took a bunch of ice and you put it into a pot and you turn the flame on, right? A lot of ice. So you fill a pot with ice. In the very beginning, you see change happen in a snap. That ice goes from being ice to water. And it's obvious. And to me, that's the foundational phase, right? It's before the foundational phase. It's the awareness phase. It's when someone's like, yeah, Mike, I always have actually compounded my errors throughout the day. Oh, wow, this is a whole different mindset that I can have to be successful. That's the ice melting. Then, I won't speak for you. For us, people go from that awareness to 2, 3, 4, 6 months of perceptively no change in their physical aesthetic, in the way that their body feels, in the way that they're moving. That's water going from 33 degrees to 219 degrees in the pot. There's no steam coming out. If there's a physicist out there who says steam actually starts at 212, fine. Or boiling is 212, right? So at 211, there's no steam coming out. There's no nothing. But then at 212, it's a whole different product all over again, right? People get lost in the 33 degree to 211 degree water because they don't think anything is changing. Do you follow me on that?
I do.
And what I think is interesting is that you've broken it down to basically tell people ice melts in this phase, but it doesn't boil in this phase. And you're obviating for me a weakness of my own in disallowing myself to have that transparent conversation with our audience because of the negative connotations that I have with that kind of relationship from other experiences. And so I appreciate that from you.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important to be open about the expectations versus reality. And we have to have that conversation with clients all the time. Mm-hmm. This is what you're expecting. Even when somebody has the extreme goal of, you know, I want to be shredded, I want to have six pack, I want to whatever their top goal is from body composition standpoint. But then we talk about all the trade-offs and what they're willing to sacrifice. And that conversation can readjust and recalibrate the goal that they set for themselves. Mm-hmm. Because on the one hand, they're saying that, but then on the other hand, they're like, well, no, I really value the like date nights where we go out to eat and I have a glass of wine with my husband or spouse or whatever. We're like, okay, well, how does that fit with your goal of being shredded? Mm-hmm. And now we have the expectations versus reality conversation. And I think once we know that the goals are aligned, and what I think is really important is to actually prioritize, set a hierarchy of values and priorities of, is the top priority losing that weight, or is it actually spending time with your family? Mm-hmm. Because if you are saying one thing and then you start acting out of alignment with your highest priority, there's this internal conflict that happens, which is usually where self-sabotage comes into play, because your espoused values are now disconnected from your values in action.
How do you tell people that? And do you do it before their clients ever?
I think I do that in a lot of my content. I think I do that
I'm talking about one-to-one.
My podcast. One-to-one, it's through asking questions. And that's, if I just say it, mm-hmm. and I say, you're full of shit because you say you want this thing, but your actions mm-hmm. tell a different story, it's going to be met with resistance and defensiveness. That's when the guard comes up. But if I ask calculated questions and I help somebody come to that conclusion on their own, that's where then they make the decision on, you know, that they're the ones that's driving the ship, and people want to feel in control.
What you're describing right now is the most frustrating part of my entire career. When I'm talking to somebody who will say something to me like, I want to do this. I need, and when we're looking to work with somebody, because of the size of the commitment that we ask for, it's not just financial, it's changing a lot about your life. And in business especially, it's changing a lot about your business and taking big risk to have a completely different business a year from now. Not just the money, the service, the values, all of it. So these conversations take a long time. And a lot of the time people get to the point where they're like, this is perfectly aligned with my values. This is exactly what I want to do. I believe that this would be successful. It would be a game changer for me and my family. And I met with my wife, and we're going to pass on it for now because we have these other things that we want to work on, like buying a house or renovating a kitchen or whatever have you. I always find myself having to take a deep breath before I say, which of the following is actually not true? Are you not sure that it would be a game changer for your family? Are you not sure that you would earn the money that you're describing that you believe that you would earn? Are you not sure that you would like the way we are going to ask you to do it? Are you not sure that you could pull it off? Are you uncomfortable telling us the truth? Are you incapable of selling your wife on the idea? Are you just trying to avoid conflict altogether? Because the words don't line up. And certainly the words and the actions don't line up. It's the reason I'm asking you about the questions that you ask here is because it's the fundamentally most frustrating thing I deal with all the time, not because of any reason except I know the cost of inaction for that person. And I don't want them to have to feel that pain.
I completely agree. And I've actually been sharing some of these stories on Instagram, on my stories. And I only share them not to criticize anybody. I don't ever mention names. But it's more so to highlight the human condition and how nuanced it is and complicated it is because of the brain that we have. And we have one brain, but two minds. And typically those two minds are competing against each other.
Which two minds? What are you talking about?
We have the mind that has the ability to survive and react and keep us, it's the human DNA that we all share across all spectrums, and doesn't matter your race, religion, demographic, whatever, we all share this commonality. If I slipped on a piece of ice and you slipped on a piece of ice and somebody across the world slipped on a piece of ice, we will all put our hand down to break our fall. That's the human condition of survival. It's we don't think about it. If you're about to get into an accident, you jerk the wheel, you move out of the way, you have this reflex, right? Like that is the human survival mechanism at play. It is the first to speak up. It tells us why we can't do things. It tells us we're not enough. It keeps us safe. It wants to keep us secure. It wants us in predictability. My favorite quote ever is by Virginia Satir. It says, "Most prefer the certainty of misery to the misery of uncertainty."
I saw you posted that recently.
And it was in reference to these stories that I've been sharing about people who reach out. But let me close the loop on the two minds. The other one is the one that wants self-actualization, that has the ability to pause and plan and think about delayed gratification. We've been able to evolve with the prefrontal cortex, which gives us the ability to say, you know what, I don't want this shit food right now because I have goals for my health in the future. I don't want to spend all of this money right now because I want to save and invest and build my wealth. And so we have the pause and plan that tells us all the things that we can do. And it's not survival based, it's growth based. And so there's this competing battle of the human mind that is kind of fixed and survival based. And then there's the growth based delayed gratification mind that wants more for us and knows that we're capable of more. And they're often competing against each other. So I've been sharing these stories of people who would, reach out and say, I'm interested in coaching. And we had one person who reached out in January of 2022, and my sales rep called her and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I scheduled the call and I forgot about it, but anyway, this is not a good time and I'll reach out if I'm interested," and just blew her off. And then very recently she scheduled another call to have a consultation. Same sales rep calls her again, and it was almost the exact same thing. Hey, I'm sorry, it's just not a good time. So
I'm getting anxiety for this person.
The question is, when is the right time? Because now you've allowed over a year, and she's still frustrated. She's still not where she wants to be.
She's probably further from where she wants to be.
Well, then the second story I shared was somebody who reached out in December and said, this would change my life. It would change, all the things that you're saying. This would change my life. It would change my body. It would change how I show up. It would change my confidence, more energy. This was in December, and she said, it's too expensive. I can't do it. Okay. Then she reaches back out to our team, and she says, hey, is Pop, that's my business is called Pop, is Pop still expensive? And the sales rep said, well, we've actually increased our rates since the last time we spoke, but tell me, how are things going? She was like, well, I've gained 10 pounds since the last time we spoke, and I'm more frustrated than ever. So, okay, are you ready to make the commitment? No, it's too much still. So this is where, to me, it's not that their words are not truth. It's that there's the fear of the unknown. And if I remain stuck in my current situation, it's the devil I know. Mm-hmm. And that's the survival-based brain trying to keep you exactly where you are because it's known and it's predictable. Stepping into that uncertainty is what's difficult for people to get over, that fear of, I don't know what's going to happen. Even if they're telling themselves, this would be a game changer, this would change my life, my body, my business, whatever it is that you're trying to invest in. There's that little part of your brain that's like, we don't know what that entails, but we know what this entails, so let's stay here.
I feel for that person, the one who asks, is it still expensive? Because it's, my empathy for them is, it may be more painful for them financially to see that money out of their account, or they may physically not have it. And so going into a debt in order to get this service may be more painful than the success of the service not ever happening is for them. I feel that. What I wish people in that position would do more often is take you up on the offer that you make every day. You put out free content all the time. Somebody who, like, here's the thing, right? Here's the way I look at it. The money that they would pay you is a shortcut. I don't have to be as diligent and disciplined on my own because I have somebody who's going to hold me accountable, which is going to be an external variable. I have somebody who's going to help me auto-regulate when I make a small mistake that could deviate me a big direction and take me a while to fix. That's the shortcut. But at the same time, if somebody takes in your content and genuinely applies your content, they will get a similar or the same result on a longer time horizon than if they pay you for it. Do you disagree with that statement at all?
Completely agree.
So how do we help more people start to make that decision? Because I saw a clip from a podcast I did recently on YouTube, and the host of the podcast puts it on YouTube, and they're not responding to the comments, and that's fine. Somebody commented, this service sounds incredible. It's exactly what this industry needs. Unfortunately, it also sounds extremely expensive. And so the gap between the people who can afford these kinds of services and the results that they're going to get and the people who can't is only going to widen as a result of this kind of stuff. The immediate inclination is, I'll kill you. That's my immediate, have you done the minimum amount of research as to how much we give away? Is my immediate thought. That lasts for half a second. And the memory lasts forever, as you can see. The next thought is, we haven't done a good enough job making clear that these free resources are not only marketing tools. They're the value. There isn't something else behind the scenes, right? Like when we create something new, for example, we created a development program for coaches in gyms before they come into our education, for gym owners who want to make sure that their staff is going to enjoy this stuff before they enroll a coach, because each coach on their staff enrolled is more money. It's more thorough of a course than any certification the coaches in their gym have ever gotten. Our clients know we're going to give it away for free, even though they pay for membership. They don't care. The information isn't what they're paying for. It's the implementation of the information. How do we, you, us, our community of businesses and people who are trying to help people who know we can't do it the way that we're inspired to do it for less? How do we get people to take us up on our free offers more often?
It's a great question. One of the concepts that I heard that I actually hate, but I think that there is some truth to it, is that people will change when the pain of staying the same is greater than the perceived pain of change. And
why do you hate that?
Because I don't like the idea of somebody waiting until there's so much pain that they literally feel like they have no other choice but to change. Right. I would love for people to say, I don't want it to get that bad, so I'm going to be proactive in making this change instead of reactive. And I can empathize, because I remember when I went to that gym, I had never stepped foot in a gym before, like in a traditional sense of I'm actually going to learn how to lift weights and build muscle and get stronger.
You never went to the rec center at Maryland?
I went to the rec center. I played a lot of basketball there.
Which court?
I probably, the NBA court.
Which one? So if you remember the rec center at Maryland, you come down the stairs. If you go to the left.
Yep, there was two.
There's two highly competitive.
I mostly played on the right side, which was a step below, but I did play on the left side before, and also had an experience where I got to play with Sean Merriman, Lamont Jordan, and some NFL players that played at Maryland.
That was definitely to the left.
That was to the left, and that was a lot of fun. But most of the time I would play to the right.
Okay.
And I had some roommates, and every once in a while we would pop into the gym. I had no idea what I was doing. It wasn't a consistent. It was a once in a blue moon thing. But when I actually bought a Groupon when I moved back home in that area, I found this little gym. I remember walking up. It was this tiny little door, and then these like creepy stairs, and it was all secluded, and I felt like I was in this like horror movie. And I peek into the door, and I'm talking like not much bigger than this studio for the whole gym.
People can't see this studio on the video. They don't know that it's a huge room.
So it was like, I look in there and I see these two people, one guy, one girl. They're doing this like crazy like movement type warm up flow, and they're fit. And I'm like, I am not in the right place. I was like, I need to turn around and walk down the stairs. But I was so uncomfortable in my body. The pain of staying the same was way greater than the perceived pain of walking through that door and being uncomfortable for a second. And then right when I opened the door, this trainer came and he greeted me, and he was very warm and welcoming, and that was it. Like the fear was over. But if I wasn't in so much pain in that moment of my current state, I probably would have turned around and walked away. And I think a lot of people look at the free content, they look at information, and it feels like you're doing something. All the time people will say like, do you have a book on how to, change your mindset around food, or how to do that? And I always am so hesitant to give recommendations, because more reading is probably not the answer. More information is not the answer. What do you know right now that you can start doing? And I don't have a good answer for how do we get people to take us up on our free stuff more often, because I do think that there is a level of current pain, unfortunately, that needs to exist for somebody to say, I'm going to do something about it. I think that there's a lot of complications with misinformation, ease of information, and access to information. Why should somebody follow me versus the person that's telling them to fast until 2 p.m. and to not eat apples and carrots? Yeah. So I think it's a tough position that we're in.
What are your thoughts on the ethics of high volume, low use products? So I'll give you my more information. Another mistake I've made in my career is, at one point we had these programs that we called our bulletproof programs: bulletproof back, shoulders, knees, hips, ankles, yada yada. They were generating in excess of $50,000 a month in recurring revenue, with more than 90% profit. I could have just not worked again, not started this company, not employed 31 people, and collected $500,000 a year and just kicked it, right? Like they were done. There was nothing to support. And people kept buying and renewing. When I went through the programs, I found that less than 10% of people who bought them started them. Forget about finished them, started them. And of the 10% of people who started them, less than 10% of them finished. And 100% of our testimonials were coming from the 10% of the 10%, or 1% of the people who bought and used. Yep. But when you have 1,000 plus people a month using a program, almost 2,000 people a month, 1% of that could be 20 testimonials. If you have people making organic testimonials and you're seeing them twice a month popping up about a program that you wrote, set it and forget it, you can fall into the guise of this stuff works for everybody. That's where I was. When I saw that people weren't using it, I was like immediately stricken with guilt. I'm making money off of people who aren't using this program. I don't want to do that. I can't sleep at night about that. Kill it. Kill it. I didn't take a moment to think, maybe not. Maybe there's some value there. Maybe you can make it more valuable without charging any more money. You do, after all, have, $40-something thousand of net revenue a month to play with. You could improve the quality. I just killed it. The hindsight is for that small percentage of people who were getting tremendous results, there were a lot of people paying a little bit of money so that they could have that. Maybe I made a mistake not offering it anymore because I allowed the people who weren't getting the results because they weren't doing the thing to cloud my judgment. I'm curious your take on that.
Yeah, I think as you were presenting it, the first thing that I thought about was what could be due to nurture those people who bought it and never used it? What could some kind of a follow-up or reach out sequence, or how could we maybe present it and deliver it in cohorts where there's a little bit more hands-on guidance that happens, where it's not just, hey, you're on your own to do this or not. Is there any way to increase the completion percentage? So that's kind of originally where my brain went. Mm-hmm. I think that issue is pretty well documented. When I was looking up, creating some kind of a course or ebook or lead magnet and looking up the statistics on that is right about what you said. Most of the people who purchase it or get it for free or whatever are not going to look at it or ever open it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to understand why that happens. I always like to explain the why behind it and create and present the problem, because then we have something tangible to work with to try to find a solution. But we have this neurotransmitter that is pretty powerful in driving our decisions and behaviors called dopamine. And a lot of people confuse dopamine with pleasure, but it's actually the promise of pleasure. So it gets us to move towards things, but it usually doesn't feel all that good. And that's kind of how you know if it's something that's dopamine driven. Like a cookie is going to stimulate dopamine, but you eat that, you have the first bite and you're like, it didn't really do it for me. I want another bite and then another bite. And it just keeps driving you to more. So there was this crazy experiment done both on rats and humans where they could pull a lever, and they had these electrodes, connected to their brain, to the dopamine center of the brain. And the way that they described the feeling was not that it was like this euphoric, orgasmic feeling. It was like, it felt kind of good, but it felt like the next one would be the one that felt good.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And so they would have these guys like pulling this lever to get this dopamine stimulation. Even when they turned off the electrodes, they just kept pulling it because they were like, no, I need this next hit. And it's a very powerful chemical. And when you set a goal, or when you sit there and you talk about your New Year's resolution and you envision this perfect body and how lean you're going to be, and taking your shirt off on the beach, and the admiration that you're going to get, and all of these things that you picture when you think about goal achievement, it stimulates a dopamine response. But then you actually have to do the work, and life settles in, and stress hits you, and that emotional high dissipates, and it's a lot more fun from the brain's perspective to start back at square one, to vision again and get that dopamine hit again, because now I'm back at square one and I can picture my body again and how great it's going to be, and I can jump into the next program, or I can buy the next $7 ebook, or I can look at the next challenge or whatever it may be that is going to stimulate that dopamine hit. So that's the problem that we're dealing with. The solution is one that I think it comes from education, it comes from awareness, and it comes from hopefully being able to reach a larger audience to say, if this pattern exists, it makes you human. There's no judgment, but here's why it exists. And you have to actively and really pause and actively, intentionally know that this is what's happening, and that you're going to exit that cycle, and you're going to do things differently this time.
Yeah. It's, I find it interesting as the business person's dilemma, because I think they're all probably fine people. And if I sat somebody in that chair who owns a company that sells templates or through an app, and I asked them, can we review your data live on the podcast right now and find out how many people, like what % of people who are buying your program are actually using it, I think there'd be a lot of unnecessary shame sitting in that seat. And a lot of, no, let's not do that, right? Let's not make that transparent. And I just find that to be so interesting because these people, I believe, are genuinely trying to do a good thing. And I think they are succeeding at doing a good thing. But when faced with the reality of how many people are actually valuing the good thing compared to how many people they can look at when they see the number of people who paid them this month is a small percentage, I find that dichotomy of the moment really interesting. That's why I brought it up with you.
Yeah.
I want to bring something else up with you. I don't usually have my phone in studio, but you made a post that I want to give you the opportunity to speak to because I thought it was really, really valuable. I got to go to your account. There it is. All the people who are sending me DMs right now about what I should ask you on the podcast. It's too late. Let's see. Hold on. I was actually smart enough to save this post, so I don't need to go to your account. All right. Okay, so I'm going to play this into the microphone so you can hear it. You'll know what it is. This way the people listening can hear it as well. Turn my volume up.
Biggest fitness and nutrition trends that need to die in 2023. Number 1, Optavia. Get that shit out of here. Number 2, 75 hard. Number 3, 1,200 calorie meal plans. Number 4, OTF or other group classes like F45 for body composition results. Number 5, kickbacks on the stair stepper. Number 6, combo movements like doing a lunge to a bicep curl. And number 7, always trying to be right instead of trying to be helpful or useful. If those trends die in 2023, I will be a very happy person.
I love that post.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. I want to understand why. I want you to share with people why some of those things, because all the things that you named, the reason that your belief is around they need to die is because they're holding people back. They're creating unconscious victims and perpetuating problems for people that could otherwise be solved through more, useful means. So, let's start with Optavia.
Yeah.
I have a friend, a good friend, who I actually love very much, very good friend of mine, who lost 30 pounds on it. And I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a dietitian. It's not my place to jump in and explain it because the first question she asked me, I don't know, right? What's the problem with it?
Where do we start?
Well, it's Optavia, Nutrisystem, any of those, right? Yep. You lose 30 pounds fairly quickly.
Yep.
And you're like, today, I see no issue. I lost 30 pounds. I feel good. What's the downside?
Yep. The downside is the physical and mental damage that it creates while teaching you nothing about how to sustain those results. And the follow-up data is pretty bleak in terms of seeing resting energy expenditure over the long term down as much as 30%. So if your metabolism, let's say you could maintain your body on, call it 3,000 calories, potentially after doing a restrictive program like that, after coming out of it, even after trying to eat more, you may see a reduction in energy expenditure by up to 30%. So just because my math is not that great, let's call it close to 1,000 calories that you have now lost, meaning that what used to be maintenance at 3,000 calories is now almost 1,000 calorie surplus that would cause body fat gain. So just to maintain your weight, you would have to eat significantly less than you previously did.
What's the time frame on that?
So what's interesting is the best study for follow-up that we have was done on Biggest Loser candidates. They did follow-up data for years. So that was the unfortunate part, was that, looking at 6 years after the diet and beyond, there was still up to a 30. And now when I say up to, that doesn't mean that every single person experienced that. But there is the potential for up to 30% reduction in resting energy expenditure from crash diets like that. The problem that I have with Optavia is, number one, it is extremely low calorie. So first and foremost,
It's sub 1,000, right?
I've seen it anywhere from 800 to 1,200.
Right.
Depending on the person. They tell you to not work out. And that's another red flag. They're telling you not to strength train because you don't have the energy to be able to, put forth the effort and to recover from strength training. And they say you'll be able to reincorporate this back into your life at a later date. But because your calories are so low, we want you to avoid strength training. So that's another red flag, which means that most of the weight that you're going to lose, there will be some body fat loss, there will be some water loss, but you will also lose a significant amount of muscle mass, which is one of the most important things for our health and longevity and metabolism and just overall well-being. We want to keep our muscle. Mm-hmm. And so, again, that also creates some of that long-term metabolic damage. I don't like the word damage, but metabolic adaptation that occurs is from muscle mass loss.
Well, you're talking about catabolism instead of an
Exactly.
anabolic response.
Also, the quality of food. We're not teaching people how to eat real food. We are shipping soy-based processed food to their door and basically telling them to live off of these meals. And then when you look at their quote-unquote approved meals, is a very small list. The most depressing thing you'll see is their approved snacks, which is like you can have a couple celery sticks, you can have a pickle, you can have sugar-free gum, or you can have like 2 almonds, and then it has like a little caveat, like careful, because nuts are very high in calories, so if you have more than a couple, it's probably not going to help your results. So if the psychological damage of not knowing, again, similar to what happened with me, of feeling like a slave to my diet, feeling like I was in shackles because I couldn't eat normal food, I had to follow these strict rules. And what happens with most people is they say very openly, no, I couldn't eat like this forever. So what happens is, what do you do when you come off the program? Now you have a slower metabolism, you have less muscle, you have no knowledge or understanding of how to eat quality foods to actually nourish your body, you haven't been strength training, so naturally the weight comes back on very quickly. I've talked to clients who've been able to maintain Optavia for over a year.
Being on it, or the results?
Being on it for over a year. And I'm talking 60, 70, 80 pounds. And then 6 months, a year after that, it was all back on plus interest. And so it is one of those things that, and let's also talk about ethics. They have been sued for false claims about the rate of weight loss. Which was ultimately what led them to rebrand under Optavia.
What were they before?
I think it was MetaFast.
Oh, MetaFast.
Yeah.
That's I got a funny story for you about that.
Yeah. And then they got sued and lost for false claims and then rebranded as Optavia. And the other thing that I know you speak about quite often is the barrier of entry for coaches. To be an Optavia coach, you need 0 experience, you need 0 education, you need 0 credentials. You just need to pay a fee to then be a certified Optavia coach. And that's the people that are leading the program.
I had a guy come into, when I was working in my father's office early in my career, he was a MetaFast salesperson. And he was like, oh, you guys could start this weight loss program in your clinic. It'd be great. Your patients would love it. Like, sales pitch was great. And my dad's like, what do you think? He looks at me, what do you think? I'm like, I have a question. It sounds to me like your business plan is that people will always need to take your protein bar or your something, so they're, for the rest of their life, you're a client, which means for the rest of their life, they lack the independence to have the body that they believe they are going to get, that's going to do for them what they believe that body is going to do without you in it, which makes them a slave to your company. Yep. He's like, no, we want them to get off. I'm like, tell me where that is in the business plan, because it sounds like you're full of shit. And I said that. This is before I was articulate. Before I was well managed with my emotions. And when he couldn't give me an answer, I got in his face. I yelled. I was like, get the fuck out of here. And my dad and my uncle were like, we hadn't decided we weren't going to do it. I'm like, you were being sold a bunch of bullshit. And we had a week of like, here's how you talk to people who come into the to the office. But so, yeah, all to say, yeah. The next question is, you talk about 75 hard, and my belief around what you're saying there is it's 75 hard and those like it. It's the idea of, unless I'm wrong, the idea of like, you must twice a day, this many calories, this much, like, because we're hard and we don't fail.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What's wrong with those things?
I think number one, it perpetuates the perfectionist mindset that if you do 10 things right, but you don't get your second workout in, you failed and you're a failure and you have to start over because you weren't hard enough. You weren't extreme enough. And we have so many people that already beat themselves up and are on this all or nothing cycle and are perfectionists and think that the standard is it's 110% or it's 0%. And I either get an A or an F. And we're just the types of people that are doing that program are the exact opposite of the types of people that need to be doing something like that. I understand when you say, you know what, I want to see what I'm capable of. I want to push myself beyond my perceived limits. There's nothing wrong with that. Somebody says, I'm going to start doing a cold plunge every day just to see if I'm mentally tough enough to get in that freezing water every day for 30 days. Totally fine. But I think oftentimes we have these type A go-getters, a lot of stress in their life, and they're already perfectionists. They're already in that all or nothing mindset. And now you're pushing them into a program that sets the standard of you're never going to be enough unless you're perfect. Mm-hmm. So I think that the intent was to say, are you capable of developing this mental resiliency that's, push yourself past your limits of what you believe is possible. I think there are more effective ways to do it that don't require some of these arbitrary rules to be like, it's either the ultimate extreme or it's total failure. Mm-hmm. And I've also talked to a lot of people, and a lot of it is, dealing with clients who have gone through the process and then just asking them. And most of the time, it's exactly what you're saying about the dependence on the program. I did 75 hard. I lost all this weight. I felt great. And then, I went right back to my previous ways and I lost all of that progress. But guess what? I'm going to do another round because, of course, that's the solution. Go back into the thing that created those problems or exacerbated the problems of being too all or nothing. But we're going to jump right back in and try and do it for a second round. And that's the more common story. I've of course, heard from people who commented on my post and they're like, 75 hard changed my life. Amazing. I'm not saying that it can't be beneficial for the right person in the right moment. I think for the vast majority of the people who are gravitating towards a program like that, it is pushing them into that perfectionist mindset even further, and it's just not necessary.
Well, right. There's a person who did Optavia and only had a 5% reduction in their resting metabolic rate after 6 months of doing it. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. It was the best thing I ever did. Yeah, sure. This is something I talk about all the time with group fitness gym owners, and I'm going to let you talk to that one next, and it'll be a nice little pitch for my business that you're giving without me having to do it. Although that might not be true. I don't know what you're going to say. I'm like, stop making your Instagram content about the person who lost 120 pounds in your gym. Stop making your Instagram content about the person who is 90 years old in your gym. Stop making your Instagram content about the person who got off of antidepressant drugs in your gym. Stop talking about the person who quit their job and got a better one in your gym. Unless you would want everybody who joins your gym to need to fit into one of those four categories, and you have the confidence that your systems can predictably create those outcomes. Because my bet would be, if we look at the people in your gym, the number of people who joined who could have lost 120 pounds and didn't, could have lost 50 pounds and didn't, 30 pounds and didn't, is exponentially higher than the number of people who lost 120. It means you can do it, not that you're likely to. You're not ready to run ads that say, want to get off your antidepressants? Come do wall balls with us. Not a likely outcome. Hate your job and your spouse? We'll teach you about life through exercise simply by being in the room. Join our gym. Not likely. Start talking to likely, right? So why is group fitness unlikely to be a good way for people to start to see the aesthetic changes that they want? When we look at the premier examples that group fitness would hang out there and be like, what are you talking about, Mike? That guy's shredded. Yep. That woman is working out in her underwear and nothing is moving. How do I do that?
Yeah. I think it's important. And I really like how you phrase that, by the way, that because somebody can do it, that doesn't mean it's the likely outcome, which is the same thing with group fitness, changing body composition.
Well, you're a lotto salesperson.
So
you're selling the lotto ticket.
Yeah. What I think is important is the language that I use, which is in particular for body composition, because I get all this pushback. Anytime I talk about Orange Theory or F45, I get all these people that are like, but I love it. And
try talking about CrossFit. You want to step on a landmine.
So it's like, it's like, but I love my Orange Theory class. And my response is amazing. Keep doing it. That is the exact reason why you should be doing group classes, because you love it. You love the community. You love the experience. You love the workout, how it makes you feel. My point is, it is ineffective for body composition change. So if you're there under the premise that this is going to transform my body to the lean, fit, toned, whatever word you want to use, it is ineffective, because you're basically doing a calorie burn exercise. You're not doing anything intentional in terms of movement, in terms of strength. You're just kind of a rat on a wheel, for lack of a better term, but it's the high intensity nature where there's nothing, you're not going to be lifting heavy enough to stimulate any sort of muscle fatigue or damage. You're just doing a glorified cardio class that is also not doing anything for you metabolically. So you're doing the work in the program, which is just going to create a calorie burn. You're not doing anything to build muscle or maintain your muscle mass, because you're not going to be able to lift heavy enough to make any sort of significant change. And I also find that the movement selection, because of the nature of having a large group, we're not really focusing on form and functionality and anything practical. It's, we're going to jump on a treadmill, we're going to jump on a rower, we're going to do some floor exercises like, push-ups or TRX rows or whatever they do. So yeah, you can burn some calories, but that's about where it starts and ends. And there's really nothing to stimulate actual body composition change.
And that is where I would say, for those of you listening, CrossFit does have a leg up on those other brands because they are lifting heavier weights and they're doing it more often. The issue with that for body composition is the way it's periodized, the consistency with which you're going to see it, and the risk, in my opinion, of micro injury orthopedically that leaves you with a longer period of time in which you're not doing things and you are overtraining other things that are going to lead to breakdown. Potentially in all cases.
Yeah. And I think that, again, the type of person that gravitates towards 75 hard is a similar type of person that gravitates towards an Orange Theory, where they're already a high stress type A, go-getter type individual, and they value a pool of sweat as indication that they did quality work or that the workout was effective. Just because they're dripping sweat on a treadmill or on a row machine, they're like, well, I worked hard today. I did a great workout because look at how much I'm sweating. And we know that those things are not correlated or connected.
I call it fitness entertainment. There's a value to it. It is a healthy thing for you to do, and you will do it consistently because it's entertaining and you like it. To mistake that with a unique solution to your unique problems is where the error occurs.
Yeah, completely agree.
And if you put 100 people with 100 different problems in a group class, spread it over 10 classes, 10 people to one coach, whatever, make the ratio good. There are going to be 10 to 15 to 20 of those people for whom that solution is perfectly aligned with their personality, their schedule, their metabolic problems, and it's going to work perfectly. And then what happens is those businesses start to say, look at all of these people. It works. Yes, as long as they are in that narrow cohort of the people who are members of your business. And you like to tell everybody else, if you could just be more like that person, without saying be more like that person, you say, The most successful people here come 4 times a week, 5 times a week. They're eating a paleo diet or a whatever diet. They're sleeping this many, and you're like, yeah, okay, well, here are the reasons in my life that that's impractical right now. So how does this element, the one that you make money on, fit into the puzzle that is me, where those other things don't exist and will not exist, and it breaks down. Yeah. Another thing you talked about that I thought was really interesting, and I actually commented on it today before you got here, was your metabolism does not slow down until you're over the age of 60. And so the idea that your metabolism slowing down is the reason that you have weight gain when you're above the age of, 21, right, is a fallacy. And what's more likely is that your lifestyle has changed in such a way that your NEAT, right, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, I wanted to say that to sound smart, is lower, which basically means throughout the day, you're burning fewer calories with your activity, right? If you work out at the gym and then you're a personal trainer, or you work in a gym and you're re-racking weights all day, you're spotting people, you're walking around, you're cleaning the floor, you're putting equipment away, that burns calories in a way that sitting at a desk does not.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's the most variable part of the equation of total daily energy expenditure. So how many calories do you burn in a given day? Mm-hmm. We have our BMR, which can be influenced, which is just what does it take to keep the lights on? If I were to just lay in bed and do nothing all day, that's still going to require a certain amount of calories for my organs to function and for my brain to function and all those things. We can build muscle, and that increases our BMR, but it's largely not that variable. Mm-hmm. We've got the energy that we burn through digesting food and chewing and digesting, which, yes, you can influence that slightly by having a higher protein and higher fiber diet, but it's pretty insignificant. We've got exercise itself, which, again, you can influence slightly, but it's not as much as you think. People significantly overestimate the amount of calories they burn in a given session. And if you are doing something that is very high caloric burn, let's say it is like an Orange Theory and you are burning a lot of calories, the more you do that exercise, the more efficient you become and the less calories you burn doing the same thing. So I don't run, if I were to go out and try to run a mile, I would burn a certain amount of calories, but then once I get efficient at running a mile, I'm burning less and less calories doing the same activity.
This is where plateaus come from.
Exactly. And then we've got the last piece of the puzzle, which is the non-exercise activity, which is walking and fidgeting and moving around and tapping your feet and doing household chores and anything that's just not dedicated exercise. That is the most variable. For some people who are, what research would say is that people who are typically fit, it can be almost as high as 50% of their overall daily energy expenditure. It can also be as low as 10% for people who are a little bit more sedentary. So that's the one piece of the puzzle that has a high degree of variability. Where we get older, as we age, we see the decline in metabolic rate based off of lifestyle changes. And what's important about research is that we tease out, because if you just look at a study on metabolic rate decline with age, it will look like a just straight line down as we get older. But the beautiful part about research is we can actually tease out certain things and say when we account for losing muscle mass, not eating as much protein, not being as active, it is basically a flat line with like the tiniest trend down. And then when we hit the age of 60, we see the natural decline pick up a little bit. But even then, it's not that significant. It's not as much as people think. So as long as we continue to be conscious of movement and exercise and nutrition, we can basically mitigate and offset any of the natural decline that would happen with age.
Well, I think my plan is when I hit 60, I'm just going to try to turn my blood into a chemistry experiment and find out what hormones can do things, what peptides can do things. So why not?
Yeah.
Right? That's a slightly hyperbolic explanation of what I plan to do. But the idea is, this is where I think a lot of what's going on in modern science actually has a huge opportunity for people, is things like testosterone replacement. When you're hitting your 50s, you're hitting your 60s, the peptides that people are taking to enhance their own natural testosterone and growth hormone, I think those things are best used, unless a doctor who you trust and is reputable is giving you the recommendation early because for whatever reason you're not producing it. That's where we can mitigate the downslide.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that we're actually societally making a mistake of jumping into it far too early because influential people are talking about their use of it.
Yeah.
Actually, funny story, we had a weightlifting coach in the gym a long time ago, maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And he got trained in the Ukraine about how to build athletes. They have a college for being a weightlifting coach. First thing he says, he comes into the office, he's like, all right, I own a CrossFit gym at the time. He's like, here's what you need to know about steroids. I'm like, I don't need to know anything about steroids. I'm a fucking gym owner and a clinician. Like, what do I need to know about steroids? He's like, everyone's taking them. It's like, the problem is, in the US, they're taking them wrong. Like, really? He says, yes. He's like, in the East and in the Russian bloc, what they're doing is they're working themselves sick, and then they take the steroids to make themselves feel better so they don't need to deload. In the US, they're taking the steroids because they think that they're going to make them better athletes, and they end up making them sick. You got to wait until you're sick to take the steroids. That's a sidebar, but I thought you'd enjoy the story. I would love to kind of bring this to somewhat of a close and let people understand what it's like to be a client with you, because my hope is that over the last hour and 20 minutes that we've been speaking, for no reason other than everything you've said, they should be able to trust you, right? And then they can go look at your Instagram account, Coach_Mike_Millner, and see that you are just consistently saying these things and giving value to the world. You have a podcast that I've been fortunate to be a guest on. I appreciate that, where you're sharing even more information of your own and other people's. You're naked. Like, they're seeing behind the curtain, but I want them to understand what it's like to actually be a client if that's something they wanted to.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that. It's funny because on the podcast I have somewhere around 560 reviews on Apple Podcasts, and I always look at the negative ones because I have a 4.9 out of 5. So I'm like, who's giving me the 1-star reviews? And most of the 1-star reviews are, he just shares the same information over and over again, said in a different way. And I'm like, I think that should be a 5-star. Right. That's my goal. But yeah, so I put it all out there. And I also do something that I was told not to do from a marketing perspective. I was told, and I didn't have any business experience, and I still consider myself very green when it comes to business. But I was told from a marketing perspective, I should only give away the what and the why and keep the how of what we do behind closed doors. And I was like, that doesn't sound very effective to me. I'm going to give the how over and over again. So when I explain our program, and anybody can go to my website, and you will see the most detailed explanation of the how. In probably people will look at it and they'll be like, this is way too much for me to read right now. You'll probably need to set aside 10 minutes to read through the whole description, but I will try to keep it succinct. Effectively, it looks like you decide that you want to work together. We go through a screening process. We make sure that we can solve your particular problem, that you're a good fit for us, we're a good fit for you. We do a personality assessment. We do a diet history, metabolic assessment. We go through your lifestyle, your personal preferences. We get to understand your situation, your values, what matters most to you, your priorities. And we start exactly where you're at, and we look at the low-hanging fruit and what's the first thing that we can start to implement that's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck change. A lot of the times it's not what people think, and they think it's about, I need to switch my macro formula, and usually it's comes down to what we started this show talking about, which is how you handle failure and setback, and the stories that you tell yourself when you overindulge, and the critical self-talk that happens when you wake up in the morning. And we address a lot of that stuff, and it's a gradual process of implementing small changes, one thing at a time, to build momentum. I like to think of it as building a rock-solid foundation and walking away knowing the bare minimum that you need to do on a daily basis to continue to make progress, whatever that looks like for you. And, sustainability, being able to, I think the proudest moments for me are the fact that when our clients leave, it's a graduation process. They're able to continue doing what we taught them on their own with full confidence. And that's how I know, we talked a little bit about the failure rate of certain products or programs. When I first started this business and I looked through our data, we were successful somewhere around 70% of the time in achieving clients' goals. They came to us for a goal. We achieved it about 70% of the time. And that still bothered me. In our one-on-one high-touch program, I didn't like that 30% were not achieving their goals. And now we've gotten that number up over 90%. So
Wow.
that is with our one-on-one program. We still have a similar issue with our challenges where people drop off. They sign up, they don't show up. But that's where we use that as kind of a stepping stone for anybody that's like, you know what, I don't know if I'm ready for the one-on-one experience. We have challenges and other options to get involved.
Mike, tell them again where they can find you.
Yeah, so best place to connect is Instagram. The handle is @coach_Mike_Millner. And my podcast is called Mind Over Macros. And it's on any podcast platform. They can go check out the episode that we did together if they want to hear more of our back and forth.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Active Life Podcast. Please remember, give us a hand, rate it, review it wherever you listen to shows. We are on a mission to humanize the healthcare industry by professionalizing the fitness industry to empower the individual to live a life unlimited by the way that their body looks, feels, or performs. If you are inspired by that mission and want to jump on the wagon, find us anywhere. Active Life Professional on Instagram, Active Life RX on Instagram. Come to me personally at Dr. Sean Pastuch. We want to welcome you onto the train. We want you to be a part of the mission. We want to offer you the opportunity to pursue this right alongside us. We're inspired by your effort, and we hope to help you in your journey. Turn pro.